I was going to talk about God's farming abilities. Right? How many of you grew up on a farm or know what farming's all about or had cash crops? And what did you do? I mean, you prepared the soil. When I was a kid, we rented a house in the southeastern Minnesota in the middle of nowhere. Just to let you know, the deprivation I suffered when I was a kid. From Minneapolis to the middle of nowhere, so my dad can go back to school at Winona State. Anyway, he grew corn and soybeans. He even converted his barns for storage areas. He bought a dryer so you could hear the corn drying at night. And then when he went to plant, I noticed the corn that he was going to plant, and it looked different. There's a nice purple color with a purple kind of a stuff on it. What is that? And so I asked him, he said, that's poison. Really? Well, you plant it in the ground, that prevents birds from coming and eating it right away. He's always thinking, I don't know if they do that anymore. I can't imagine, but who knows? Even in the good soil, you had to take precautions. But he prepared it, and the soil is like this out here. It's rich, black soil, full of good stuff for crops. So why in the world would God take seeds and just chuck them anywhere and everywhere? I don't get it. I mean, 25% out of the four? There's 4 different categories. Maybe 25% of what was thrown actually grows and produces? Well, hundredfold and 60-fold and whatever. But you'd think, is that a waste? Really? You'd take your first crop, your first fruits of your crop and do it for next year, the best of your crop? And yet, I just don't get it. Well, I do have an analogy, though. Confirmation class. We do come to this, right? There's 10, 12 kids sitting there, 6th through 8th grade. There's 5 adults giving our wisdom and our life experiences, our knowledge, unparalleled in this century. And we don't know if anybody's listening, because you got some people talking over here, you got some people with his little fidget spinners, you got people talking, we've had to move kids because they have their buddies and they're not paying attention. And so we're thinking, for this hour and a half, what did we actually accomplish? We just talked, and all this good seed was thrown, and what happened to it? And then the next week we said, so what did we talk about last week? And they go, we talked about this, this, and this. And I go, how did that happen? You were listening, and we never knew. We thought we were just chucking stuff on rocky soil and thistly soil and whatever else, but you were actually paying attention. I guess there's hope after all, isn't there? Amazing. Then another example, and I think about the different types of soil. We think about our country, probably the most powerful country ever. We have more protective services than any other country in the world. It could be described as thistles. I mean, we have these, on thistly ground, when the seeds are thrown in thistly ground, it's pretty well protected. Not a lot of animals or predators are going to come in and get that seed without getting poked by thistles. But, as the seed grows, then the thistles choke it out because the thistles grow up along with it. In this country, we have the protective services. It could be called the thistles, too. And yet, there's some things happen to us. 9/11 and other things that happen within our country. We couldn't have known or foretold or protected against it. And it's like every other country in the world that's had this kind of thing happen to it. No matter how protective we are, no matter how deeply ingrained we put our thistles, something's going to happen to it. And even in thistly ground, there will be animals that have protective coverings that will get to the seed somehow and eat it. What kind of ground are we? What kind of ground are we? Are we that path, shallow, hear it out one year and out the next year? Or are we thistly? We're just so bothered with everything that's going on around the world, we just can't have the time to pay attention? On rocky soil? Or are we good soil? Yes! Yes! We're all of them, right? At one point or another in our lives, in part of our lives, we're part of all this kinds of stuff. Sometimes I hear something that comes in one ear and out the other. Other times it sinks in, and I learn something from it. And sometimes I have my defenses up so high that no one can get through. That no matter what they say or do, I'm not listening. I just, I'll talk to the hand. I'm not listening to what you have to say to me. But I think we all go through that. And sometimes on a daily basis, we fluctuate. And we hope that more than often than not, we would be the good soil. So when we experience things that we're taking it in and we're paying attention, we're gleaning what we can from it and learning from it. I guess, in AA, at the end of the meetings, they say, you take what you can and leave the rest. Okay, that leaves it open to a lot of different things. You take what's meaningful to you and disperse with the rest. The depths of our lives can vary too. And we all know people that are deep livers. Not the liver here, but people who live life. Right? I mean, they have deep friendships. They have a meaningful time alone. They are open to new things. They're very loving. And we know people like that. And I'm sure, looking at their outside, we don't know what's going on inside. Maybe they're feeling like rocky soil, thistly soil, and all this kind of thing. But we see people who seem to emulate that good soil. And we can kind of see that and go, it's not quite what I would do, but it gives me hope that I can be sort of like that too. Why would God throw the seed everywhere? I've had it where seed represents grace. God just throwing grace anywhere and everywhere. Like the rain coming down, it just falls on everything and anybody. Whether we're receptive to it or not, it's up to us to say, oh, wow, I really am blessed with a lot of things. I mean, not possessions so much, but friends and a relatively good life, meaningful relationships and a sense of purpose maybe. But God just throws it anywhere and everywhere. And for us, how do we take that and run with it? I mean, God is throwing all this stuff to us. How do we act with that gift? I mean, all that is, it's all gift, right? It's all gift that we get. Whether we do something with it or not, it's up to us. We do something with it, then it's gift to others. What if we were to spread love and kindness like God throws the seeds everywhere? What if we throw love and kindness to anybody and everybody we encounter? Whether they're indifferent or mean or receptive or what have you, how does that affect our lives? How does it affect their lives? Well, we don't know how it affects their lives unless they have a smile on their face and they thank you but we don't really know. But the fact is, we just throw it out there. God just throws it out there. Whether people are receptive or not, whether it's going to be listened to or not, it's there. Wasteful, right? Back in the 60s when the Lutheran churches were deciding, the LCA and ALC were deciding whether to ordain women. Why would they do that? Well, now we find that women are powerful preachers, they're powerful caretakers, they're powerful pastors, they're powerful, a lot of things that, just like the men are. God's throwing the seeds out and opening the span of people who will receive it. Also, we in the church are often slow to invite and to kind of throw our seeds out, and so we have limits in our own minds. We're only going to give to there who are going to get something back. And we don't realize that there's so many other people that give back in so many different ways. Those people on the streets, all people's church. When I first talked to the pastor there, he said, when I went out in the neighborhood and I was talking to people and they said, I'm going to be a member of your church, I'm going to be on council, he took them seriously. And rightly so, because they became members and council members. And throw the seeds out and let God take care of whatever results will happen. There's so much abundance that it doesn't really matter. We have love and kindness in abundance that It doesn't matter who we talk to, who we spread it to. God has so much abundance that it seems wasteful, but there is hope. We know of people that seem to be just a tough nut to crack, and yet they turn. They change their lives. They listen. Maybe not right away, but years down the road, we don't know what happens. But we throw it out there and let the results happen with however God will deal with the consequences. Is it eternal hope that God has? I have to believe that's why it's all thrown out. That's why we act the way we do, because there is always hope. And no matter what situation we encounter, there is always hope. And that's what builds the bridges to our faith, our sense of being, our sense of purpose, our sense of connectedness to God, and what have you. Oftentimes we take steps forward and steps backward. That's life. It's going to happen to all of us. Sometimes 2 forward, 1 back, sometimes 2 back, 1 forward. But that's just the way it is. God still throws the seeds. Grace is still thrown. Loving kindness is still thrown. Hope is still abundant, no matter what we're doing in our lives. We may not recognize it or receive it, but it's there. We have to believe that the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ covered whatever we are, covered all the different kinds of soil that we kind of have within us. The death and resurrection bypasses and is greater than all of that stuff that's going on in our lives. We may be fully living in Thistleville, but we are saved. We may be treading a path that doesn't take root, yet we're saved. We may be on rocky ground when that happens, and yet we're saved. We may be that most fertile soil you've ever seen, that person that has a deep, deep sense of spirituality, and we're saved. So whatever soil that we're in the midst of, whatever we do, we are saved. The cross and resurrection is greater than all of that which we may or may not do. Wherever we're at in our lives, we have the blessed assurance that God has us in God's hands, and there is hope in that. Jesus did this all the time. Second-class citizens, women, children, cripples, lame, blind, lepers, whatever. Did he waste his time? No. That's just who Jesus was. That's just who God is. It is God's pleasure to give and give and give to us. That's God's nature. Amen.